Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Dr. Hawthorn here, and today we will have the second episode of Blender tutorial, which is modeling. Now, let's jump in. Yesterday, we have talked about the user interface. We have installed the software to your computer. I want to tell you that any software or plugins or add-ons that we have been introducing or we will be introducing in the tutorials, I will keep the links down below. If you are interested in trying out any of those, please feel free to click in and install that to your computer. And also, if you are interested in having some practice or some exercise through this tutorial, please stay until the end of this episode. We do have a bonus for you. Yesterday, we have talked about the user interface of the software, including on top, we have the top menu where you can save and open the file. Next to it, we have the workspaces and outliner on the right-hand side with property panels. And in the middle, we have 3D viewport, and underneath, we have the timeline and the status bar. These are the default setting of the software, and if you are working on some files and later on you get lost or these windows is changed to anything else, just to have a heads up is that here on each of the window you will see a tiny button on the top left corner. If you are changed to any other window that might be not useful for you, but you did that accidentally, that you can click anytime on this button and change it back to what it was supposed to be. This would be a very useful tool for you later on as we started modeling. If you want to just get more space on these panels, you can just hover your mouse to these borders and drag and drop to rearrange your workplace. Yesterday, we have also talked about 3 basic commands of transforming or moving around or playing with any elements in the viewport, right? We have rotation, R, grabbing, G, and scaling, S. And today, we will use more of that. When we talk about modeling, we must introduce to you another mode in the viewport. What we have now is object mode, which means that you can switch selection from one object to the other. Well, that includes everything, basically. You can choose the selection of a camera or a mesh or a light, or if you have any reference images, you can also select that, and including some paths and other things that you might add to the scene. You can also switch selection among this kind of stuff. But if you are talking about modeling, we must know about edit mode. And edit mode only appear when you select the certain type of things. For example, this case, we have the mesh here in the center of the screen. And if you have selected that and go to the top left panel, you have object mode, and second to it, we have the edit mode. And edit mode, once you select that, it will become something like this. At least the toolbar on the left-hand side will get longer and with more functions. And I will show you the basic ones later. If you want to switch between the modes very quickly, you can also use a hotkey on the keyboard. That is the tab on your keyboard that is above the caps lock. Just tap on the keyboard, you can switch back and forth from the object mode to edit mode or from edit mode back to object mode. As you can see, when you go to the edit mode, and you can select only elements that's involved into this cube. And if you want to select the camera or the lights, it doesn't work because you are inside edit mode of this cube. I am often being asked by my students, hey, why I cannot select the other element? I cannot select the cylinder next to it. Why? Well, because you are in the edit mode. So the more you get into this software, you will know exactly what you are doing and what kind of mistake will happen if you don't do certain thing. Now, when you are in the edit mode of this cube, you must know there are 3 elements that made of this cube. First, we have the points. And the points, we call it a vertex. A vertex, it's a basic element of a mesh. And two vertices together, we make an edge. And four edges together, we make a face. Well, that is very literal and very intuitive, is that a cube, of course, consists of 8 points, 8 vertices, and 12 edges, and 6 faces. You might want to ask me, if this is the case, can I just select one face instead of having 4 points, or can I just select one edge without selecting 2 points? You got it right. There is an option. If you look at what is on the top left corner of the screen, we have 3 types of selection tool. If you select any of this, of course, the elements that you will be able to select is different. And there is shortcut and hotkeys on the keyboard as well. That is the horizontal numbering. If you press 1 on the numbering, oops, wow, I'm pressing 1 on the keyboard and I'm changed to front view. Why is that? Let's recap. If we look at the preferences, input, I have emulate numpad on. And that is because I used to work with my laptop with me only because I like to bring my computer around. But now I'm at home and I have the large keyboard. I don't have to emulate numpad. I have numpad next to on the right side of my keyboard, which I can switch from front view with 1, side view with 3, top view with 7. And so, in that case, I don't have to emulate anything. If I press 1 on the horizontal numbering on the keyboard, I'm selecting vertex. If I'm pressing 2, I'm selecting edge. If I'm pressing 3, I'm selecting face. You can have look at this and see which one you want the most. If you have a small keyboard, then maybe you want to have different selection tools easily switched, or you want to have the views easily switched. That is your idea. That is your decision. And if you want to change the setting, simply go to Preferences. Under Input, you can emulate numpad for it. For basic modeling skills, today we will focus on 3 commands. First, we will have extrusion, and then we have loop cut. Finally, we have bevels. And now, let's start with the extrusion. And extrusion is very easy to use if you want to press on the button on the left. Once you press the button on the left, if you have selected a face, then you will see a circle and a handle with a plus sign on the end. Or if you have not selected anything, nothing will change. Extrusion, what does it do is that if you press on the plus sign and if you drag it up, then you will create an extra mask for your mesh. And this is creating a rectangular cube. I want to ask you something. Imagine that I'm adding another cube in the scene. By the way, adding a new element is Shift A. So under Shift A, we have the Add panel. And under Mesh, we can select whether you want to have a plane, a cube, a circle, UV sphere, or a cylinder, or a cone, or a torus. So now I want to add a cube. Let me bring it to the side. And if I just do grabbing means I can move the face around, right? And of course, this face is connected to the other 4 face on the side. So if I'm grabbing the top face, everything is moving along, but basically I just have to move one face to affect the other 4 as well. Now, if I'm grabbing it, and if I restrict this to the Z-axis, I can also bring it up, right? And now, if you take a look at these 2 stretched cubes, they may look the same from the object mode. And you may ask me, why do I have to do an extrusion if I can have two cubes the same without extruding anything? The thing is, if you get into the edit mode for these two cubes together, you will see the difference here. For this one, on the left-hand side, we have a stretched cube, and it still has 4 edges on the vertical lines, right? In total, the cube is the same. We have 8 vertices and 12 edges and 6 faces. But if you take a look at this one on the right-hand side, actually we are adding extra faces to the element. We are adding 4 extra faces to the cubes, and that allows us to do more extrusions. I can keep extruding and without sacrificing anything. Or if I do extrusion from this tube directly, you see what happened? I'm extruding the entire face on the cube. However, on this side, because it's already divided into 2, if I do extrusion, it's only the top half of the cube that is being extruded. This is the difference between having a cube extruded and having a cube just grabbing a face and prolonged. Now, you may ask me, Dr. Hawthorn, what if I started wrong and I just pull this face up? What can I do to fix it? Let's come to the second option and the second function that I want to introduce to you today. That is in loop cut here. We have a function to cut the mesh loop and slide it. Now, when I have this function on, and if I hover my mouse to this mesh, then you will see a yellow line around the cube, right? This is the loop cut function. If I press my mouse once, then I will cut it into half. And let's say we do this single command, and if we deselect everything, and we'll see almost the same function as what we did with another cube with extrusion. Now, this is to help you divide your mesh into loops. And now, if you want to do extrusion like the other one, you can do it. Simply select a face and do extrusion. And by the way, you can see that I'm not really pulling the handle. That is because I'm using the hotkey for extrusion. That is E, of course, intuitively. E. So you can do extrusion by just pressing E on the keyboard and moving your mouse around, right? Now, loop cut can also have the similar effect as extrusion. The thing is, loop cut is cutting what we have already, and extrusion is adding extra mass to the mesh that you already have. The last command I want to show you today is bevel. Everything, even those that are very, very sharp, it has a rounded edge if you zoom into it. For example, a knife or a sword. If you look at the blade very closely, you can still see that called bevel, beveling the edges or beveling the vertices for you to make your mesh more human. Now, when you have this toggled, and if you select the element on your mesh or A to select everything, in this case, I'm only selecting, let's say we are selecting only these 2 faces. You can drag and drag it out. And you can see that the bevel is done. I'm adding more faces to the cube. And anything, anywhere that I did not do the selection, it won't be touched. It won't be affected. And now you may ask me, it still looks sharp. It's not rounded. Although we have 1 extra face add on each edge. And that is because we can do more changes to the setting. Let me move myself to the other side of the screen. We can have this little guy here on the lower left corner. And this little guy is very tricky. It only appears after you do one command, and it will disappear when you click anywhere on the screen. Let me undo it and do it again. With Bevel, I drag, and this guy appears again. Take this chance, open the panel, then you will have several options, a lot of options actually, but we will focus on only a few of them as a beginner. Now, you can affect the edges, which is what we are doing now, and we can choose only to affect the vertices. If I am doing the affection to only vertices, you will see that the cube is transformed into something like a die. But if I'm doing edges, that can be exaggerated, of course, for the first time getting to know the bevel. If I do this, I'm affecting the edges, and when the edges meet, I'm also affecting the vertex. I can change the amount of width. The more I add to it, of course, the area is getting wider and wider, and the smaller I use, the edge will be narrower and narrower. And I can also add segment to it. Now I have only one segment, meaning I'm only adding one face to the face that I have affected. And if I increase it into 2, then there are 2 faces in between the 2 faces I selected. And if I'm adding 3, as you can anticipate, I'm creating extra 3 faces in between the 2 faces I selected. You don't want to exaggerate the segment number, because if this is a small mesh in a big scene, you don't want to have so many faces. They are unnecessary. If you zoom out of the scene, you can see that it's almost smooth on the edge. 3 segments will be more than enough. And now, there is one thing I want to draw your attention to, and you have to keep in mind, is that, do you know the scale of a cube matters, or the scale of a mesh matter if we are doing bevel? Let me get rid of this cube and add 2 cubes, one next to each other. If I just stretch this cube wide, I did that in edit mode. Now I'm switching back to object mode. In this case, I stretch the cube wide in object mode. Let's see. By toggling the panel on the right-hand side, and you can see that the scale of the first cube, which I did the transformation inside edit mode, remains 1 to 1 to 1, which means that it is very proportional. And if we click on the one that is on the right-hand side, the scale is 2 to 1 to 1, which is not proportional. It is stretched. Okay? This is the case. If I'm doing bevel on the proportioned cube, I select everything. I exaggerate bevel here. You can see that what we have, they are very proportional. And the width of these added faces, they are the same size. But if we are doing bevel on this stretched cube, and you can see that the face, the horizontal face added to it, is only half the size of this face. This is because of the scale, because the scale is messed up, and so this is also messed up. What we have here, x to y is 2 to 1, and definitely the width of the bevel is 2 times the width of the bevel on the other axis, right? How do we fix that? We can do that when before we do the bevel, we set the scale. The damage is done, but we can fix it. We can go back to the object mode, select this cube, and use Command A or Control A if you're having a PC to apply something. To apply location, meaning that to reset the location of the mesh, or to apply the scale, and in this case, we only want to apply the scale. When we click that, you see scale of X is going back to 1. And now, if we go to the edit mode and do the bevel, it looks exactly the same as the other one. We have talked about extrusion, loop cut, and bevel. So now let's try something. We are going to build a small squarey end table. Whatever you want to create, you start with something very similar in shape. We want to build a squarey end table, and we can start with a cube. But if we are building something circular, then you may want to start with a cone or with a cylinder. Let's stick with this little cube. First, we go to Edit Mode by tab. We can select everything with A, size, or scale it down with S and restrict this into Z-axis by Z. If we push the cursor closer to the center of the cube, we are reducing the depth of the mesh or the height of the mesh. Now, we have compressed cube, and this will be our tabletop. Then we can use the function of loop cut. In this case, I can place the loop cut here in the center, open this little guy here. We can increase the number of cuts to 2 because we want to create legs to it, right? I have something like this. If you look at this mesh from the top view by pressing 7, we have this, and with 9 grid on top and at the bottom, of course, because we are doing loop cut, and so it's a cut as a whole. What I want to do is that I don't want this little tabletop having 4 legs that are super thick. I want to reduce the thickness of the legs. Now, there are 2 things that I can do. First is to stretch the loop cut more to the side. What I can do is to select the loop, and to select, as you can recall, we can select the edge by using edge select and just go around the mesh, or you can use Option or Alt in the PC keyboard to select the entire loop, and with Shift and Option together, and click, you can select multiple loops. And now you have selected 2 loops and you want to stretch it to the side. What we can do is to actually scale the loop. If we scale up the loop, you can see it's going to the side, but at the same time, it's going thicker and it's going longer. In this case, I would want to only restrict the scaling on the x-axis because you can see that we are working on the x-axis. We are stretching the loops to the side, which makes a smaller area on the side. And we can also stretch these not to the side this time, but to the other, along the other axis. Scaling on Y, we can also push them apart. When I do that, I will create a tabletop with more the tabletop and smaller area for the legs. What I can do is to select these 4 faces and do simple extrusion. And when I do extrusion, remember the hotkey is E. I'm creating 4 legs. They are the same length, almost the same width or same size, because if you look from the top, you can see that the 4 squares are more or less the same scale. Of course, you can always measure the length of each edge, but in this case, I'm just doing the measurement by my eyes. And if you want to just add a little bit more decoration to it, you can also scale it up or scale it down. Now, if I scale it up, it looks more like a kid's tabletop, something like this. Or I can scale it down, but I want to have the legs straight down to the floor, while the bottom of the leg is smaller than the top of the leg. What I can do is to change this. This is the transform pivot point. For now, we have the medium point. Medium point meaning when I select the 4 legs together, the median point is at the center of 4 legs. And of course, in this case, if we scale it up, they are pulled apart. But I can also change to individual origins. It means that each face is actually transformed individually. And in this case, I want to scale it down, and you can see that the leg is actually straight down to the floor, but the bottom of the leg is getting smaller. Now, this might be a bit exaggerated. Let me just refine it a little and pull it down more a little. And now, when I have this tabletop already done, what I can do is to add a little bevel to the tabletop. What I can do here is to select the bevel tool, A to select everything, pull the handle a little bit, and see the entire table is beveled, and I want to add a little segment to it, maybe 3 segments. Now, this cute end table is done. Easy, right? So, 3D modeling is not as scary as you think, right? Now you can do the same by creating the end table and also a little chair with a backrest. Tomorrow's tutorial, I will recap what we have learned today by creating this little chair with you. And then we will move on to coloring and texturing. Alright, let's try. Today's section, are you ready for the bonus? Now let's jump in and see what we have here. Wow, this is super messy. What happened here? Now, actually, this is a classroom corner that I prepare for all of my students just to get used to the user interface and also basic transformation tools like scaling, grabbing objects, and rotation. So now this is yours, and you can feel free to just try tidying up the room. And at the end of this episode, as a bonus point, we might review how we can do this properly. This is yours now. Get your hands to it and stay tuned for the other episodes. Bye!